Hey, what's going on guys? RVZ South here, and in today's video I'm going to be giving you guys my opinion on the best top lane champions for Preseason 5 patch 4.20. So not a lot has changed since last patch, just one champion is being swapped in and one is being swapped out, and the honorable mentions are a little bit different, but other than that, not a lot has changed. So without further ado guys, let's get into the video. Starting off at the number 5 spot is going to be Swain again. Pros to Swain are he's pretty much unkillable late game. Once you can pick up your Zhonya's and when you have your ultimate running, it's really hard to kill a Swain. He also does tons of AoE damage and he's strong at all stages in the game. He's also ranged, which makes him a really good pick against the melee top laners, and his passive is also really strong for laning because he rarely will run low on mana because of it. He's also got pretty good CC with his W and his Q, and he's also super strong when ahead. Cons to Swain are he doesn't have any mobility, so you have to be careful at around the 4 to 5 minute mark because that's when the jungler will probably be ganking you. If you're playing against a jungler that's on my top 5 list, then they might be able to gank you before 4 minutes at around like 3 minutes and 30 seconds, but just be careful that you're not pushing out too much in lane as Swain because he doesn't have an escape. He also does have some mana problems come mid-game because once you are running your ultimate for a very long time, you will run out of mana pretty quickly, so I'd recommend convincing your jungler to hand over blue buff to you come mid-game. Next up on my list is going to be Gnar. So pros to Gnar are he's a super strong laner because like Swain he is ranged, and he's got great kiting potential as well with his Q. His Mega Form is also really strong, especially for team fighting. If you can find a team fight when you're in Mega Form and use your ultimate to knock the enemies into a wall and then follow that up with your W and your Q, the chances of you winning that team fight are going to be very high. He can also build tanky and still do quite a bit of damage, and he's got very few counters as well, and he is also strong at all stages in the game. Cons to Gnar are he does heavily rely on Mega Form, so I would recommend communicating with your team and letting them know when you're about to go into Mega Form, or let them know when you're going to engage, because Gnar is at his best when he's in Mega Form, and you're much better off trying to find team fights when he's in Mega Form instead of in normal form. And he also does have a short auto attack range, so like I said in my last video, if you're going up a champion like Pantheon, his stun range is actually pretty much the same range as Gnar's auto attack, so you have to be careful against champions in lane who have longer CC than your auto attack range. So next up on my list is Vladimir, and Vlad is making his first appearance on my list in a while, and it's mainly because of the recent jungle changes. So before, what Vladimir would do is he would push lane a lot, and because of this he'd be an easy gank target because he has no mobility. But because of the recent jungle changes, junglers won't be ganking till around the 4 to 5 minute mark, so this is an indirect buff to Vladimir because it enables him to poke down his opponents with his Q and his E and then zone them for a pretty long time. Of course, when you reach the 4 to 5 minute mark, you have to be careful and make sure that you're warding up because that's when the junglers will be coming to gank, but before then, it enables him to just poke down his opponents and zone them really easily. He's also got insane AoE damage with his ultimate and his E, and he's a teamfight specialist. Come late game, if you can land your ultimate on multiple targets, then it's going to do a lot of damage. He's also a really strong laner because he's got great sustain with his Q, and he's got really strong wave clear as well. He's also, like I said, a late game monster because of his damage from his ultimate. Cons to Vladimir are he doesn't have any mobility, so like I said, at around the 4 to 5 minute mark, make sure that you're not pushing out in lane too far, or make sure that you've got a ward because you are a pretty easy target for the enemy jungler to gank. And he is also very weak when behind, and he doesn't really have any good CC at all either. At the number 2 spot, I have Rumble. Pros to Rumble are he's strong even when behind, and the reason why I say this is because when you're playing as Rumble, if you don't do too well in lane, as long as you group with your team and you can land a good ultimate in a team fight, then it could completely change the momentum of the game onto your side. He's an insane team fighter because of his ultimate and his AoE damage as well, and he's a pretty strong laner because of his passive. He's also great in close quarters areas like in the jungle because it's a lot easier for you to land your ultimate as Rumble if you're fighting in the jungle, and it's a lot harder for the enemies to escape out of your ultimate when you're fighting in close quarters areas. He also has really strong zoning potential with his ultimate, and he's got very short cooldown abilities as well. Constant Rumble or his ultimate can be hard to land, so like I've said in my previous videos, if you're new to Rumble, then I would recommend going into some normal games and practicing his ultimate, because if you can't land your ultimate as Rumble, then you're missing out on a lot of his kit, and he's also got pretty weak mobility as well. So number 1 on my list for another patch is going to be Irelia. Pros to Irelia are she's got a 2-second stun, which is just really strong. If you can land this on an enemy squishy target come late game, then you're going to be able to 100 to 0 them before they can even get out of the stun. She's also got very few counters in lane, and her passive is also very strong, especially for team fighting. She does true damage as well with her W, and her W also gives her sustained, so she's a pretty good pick against tanky champions, and she can build tanky and still do a lot of damage. What I like to do on Irelia is obviously build Trinity Force first, and then depending on how well my team is doing, if my team's doing well, then I like to usually build a Blade of the Ruined King second, but if my team is going even or we're not doing too well, then I just go full tank from there. And she also has an insane mid-game power spike because the Trinity Force just synergizes so well with her, and she's also very easy to play in my opinion. Cons to Irelia are her ultimate's damage is pretty weak, and her E does not always stun. So honorable mentions for this patch include Jace, Fiora, Wukong, Yorick, and Riven, and the reason why pretty much all of these champions aren't on my list is because they're only good in certain situations and in certain matchups, so you're not going to want to pick them in like for every game because they do have quite a few counters. The reason why Riven's not on my list is because she does have a lot of counters. For example, Jace, Renekton, Jax, Lulu are just a few champions who counter her really hard, but if you can find that right matchup when playing as Riven, she just snowballs insanely hard, and if you can get out to a lead in the early game, then you're going to be able to carry really hard as her. Yorick is also kind of like Vladimir, where he got an indirect buff with the recent jungle changes. So Yorick is like Vladimir because he pushes out in lane quite a bit and he pokes down his opponent. So with Yorick, for Yorick, when you're playing him, it just enables you to poke your opponents down and zone them even more now because the junglers won't be ganking you till around the 4 to 5 minute mark, and his ultimate is also pretty good for team fighting. Wukong also doesn't have the best matchups in lane, but if you can get to late game and you can get a good ultimate off in a team fight, then he's just a really strong pick because of his ultimate. And Fiora is a lot like Riven, where she has a lot of counters, but if you can find that right matchup and you're not going up against a lot of CC, then Fiora is a really strong pick because she's got a lot of damage. And Jace is always going to be a pretty strong pick for top lane because he's ranged and he also has pretty good poke, and come late game as Jace, your damage is just absolutely insane. So that is all for the video, guys. If you enjoyed, then be sure to like and subscribe for more League of Legends content, and if you're wondering why I didn't include a certain champion on my list, then be sure to comment below asking me why, and I'll get back to you shortly on that. But thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in my next video.